Welcome to the creative brain of Dean Hawk. Get ready to be challenged, inspired, and equipped to become a better ministry leader.
Hey, welcome to the March Leadership Podcast. This is Dean. I'm so excited to have my wife join me today. Thanks for coming.
Yes, my name is Kim, and a subject today is talking about preparing for retirement.
Well, establishing a financial plan to retire. Now, that word retire throws a lot of people and they get like, oh, I'm never retiring, I'm never doing that. I'm not talking about your career or your preaching. I'm talking about your investments, your savings, and we just want to open up and give you some basic information. We are not financial planners. We are not certified accountants. We are sharing our story, and Kim is the CFO of our home, and she is the CFO of the church. And a lot of what you are going to hear today is because of her wisdom, and she has led. So that's why she's here. She's going to be sharing a lot of the info. But explain where we began, and don't get bummed if you didn't start when we're starting, but just challenge where we're at, because we've been doing some number crunching.
So we started, I looked back because I wasn't even sure, but we started in the year 2000. Prior to that, I think we maybe had $5,000 to start.
We hadn't done anything.
We hadn't done anything. So don't be disappointed. You just got to start somewhere. But I'm going to say that some of you, I don't know that it's as popular today. The people that I hear of, it's not as, but some of you have filed a Form 4361, which means that you've opted out of Social Security. So if you've done that...
Dean did that because
in the 80s, everybody did.
45 years ago, they said, hey, Social Security isn't going to be around. This is a good thing. It's a religious objection to public insurance. I signed it, and so I will be getting a minimal Social Security, but developing a financial plan. So what worked for us?
So what worked for us was, in the beginning, I was told something called a Roth IRA. And a Roth IRA, which is different than a 401k or a 403b, which is the nonprofit side of a retirement plan. I will tell you, our church didn't have one until maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and the church is 20 years old. It took a while before we could develop that and fund that. So I'm going to go quickly and explain, and you don't have to know everything. If you even can just ask others better questions or ask a financial better questions, that's going to be the goal. So
explain, let's just go through those two.
Okay.
Explain a Roth IRA, and then let's talk about the pros and cons and inside and out of both.
So a Roth IRA, let's talk that you make $100,000 a year just to make it a simple number, because it might just be $50,000 a year. I don't know what you make, but let's say you have $100,000 a year and you contribute the maximum, which every year it changes, or most years it changes. So if you're under 50, your max is $7,000. If you're 50 or over, your max is $8,000 in any 1 year.
Per year.
Per person.
So both of us could...
Correct. So for a Roth, that's what we started doing in 2000. And so if you make $100,000 a year and you put $7,000 in, you still pay taxes on $100,000 a year. The difference in this Roth IRA, and Senator Roth is the one that set this up years ago, the difference in that is what we put in starting in 2000 until now, it has grown. And we will not, when we take distributions out of that, we will not have to pay tax on it. So if that $8,000 each year grows to be $50,000 in 20 years, you don't...
it'll be a lot more than that.
It would be. But whatever it is at that point, I'm just telling you, then you don't pay on the earned money, right? You don't pay taxes on it. So now a 403b, on the other hand, let me go back to the Roth. How we do it is I take that $8,000 a year, because we're both over 50. But I take that $8,000 a year, I divide it by the number of times that we get paid in a year, which is 24, and I put back into an account every single time we get paid.
Listen to this. This is good.
So that there's always enough money to then invest into our Roth. So now let me go one step deeper. if you're going to do a Roth, I didn't pay someone to invest for me at the time. I thought $8,000, that's not enough for anyone, or $7,000 at the time, or I think it was actually 5. But whatever it was, I didn't pay someone to invest. I took Dave Ramsey's deal and I just picked a company. So whether it's American Funds, Vanguard, Janus, a mutual fund, I picked a company, and all I did was I pulled up their thing, and all I knew enough was to say, I want a fund that's been around at least 10 years. I want to be in more than one fund, and I want something that at 10 years, that the growth, or since inception, which it'll say SI, since inception, you look down, and I wanted to get the highest number I could. So I looked at everything that was 10% or more, and I took that 7,000, 5,000, whatever that money is, and I picked like 4 or 5 accounts, and I just put a little bit in each one. That's how simple it was, and that's kind of, I oversimplified it, but that's what I did.
And here's what you have to recognize is a lot of people start too late, but the best time to start is now. You know, somebody said, what's the best time to plant a tree?
10 years ago?
20 years ago. If you want a shade tree, plant it 20 years ago. So don't beat yourself up where you're at. Just start being very intent now. But to those of you that are in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, you are in prime time season, because here's what I want to bait you with. We began to crunch our numbers as I entered into my 60s, and we're looking forward, and what do we want to do? and I see myself continuing to preach and to minister, but we've been kissing this money goodbye for decades now, and we really weren't sure how are we positioned for the future. And here's one of the things that was so refreshing. Last year we sat down with a financial planner, encourage you to.
And that was the first time we'd ever done that.
We had just been doing the Roth and the 403B. We'll explain that in a moment. We've just been doing that, and here's the way I'll summarize it. If I couldn't work tomorrow, if tomorrow I was done, essentially we are in a position to continue our standard of living through the retirement years of the 70s and 80s and up into they've figured us out into the 90s, that we have a sufficiency of funds to live and to go that and make it through. And we're not greeters at Walmart because we have to. It's because I'm a people person and I wanted to get out and see some people in my 90s.
All right.
All right, a 403B. Explain that.
So similar to a 401k, a 403B, we did one at the church, but we kind of just piggybacked onto another company, so I didn't have to file things and all of that. A 403B is something where we put a certain amount of money, and our church and a lot of churches will match. So we've got employees that might only do $50 a paycheck, but the church matches. And usually there's a max. Often it's 3, 4, 5%.
It's actually a little higher than that. I was talking to some other churches and pastors. I would say anywhere from 3 to 10%.
Okay. So some people will max that out and do 10%, but whatever you can do, this is free money. It's like adding to your income. If you even do $100 a month, just think that's $1,200 a year, but someone else is giving you.
Matching it.
And matching it. And then they manage those funds. You usually do some sort of risk assessment based on your age, how long it's going to be. The benefit to most 403Bs, or a lot of 403Bs, and if you're the one that would be setting this up at your church, the question to ask might be, during retirement for those ministers with this 403B, even if they're not working, often you can use it as a housing allowance. So if you have a couple $100,000 in there and you're like, man, I've got a $10, $20, $30,000 a year housing allowance, or 50 or whatever, you can take that money out tax-free. So again, it's about it being tax-free. And when you find a financial planner, I think something that's going to be really important, although I have some that are in my church, we didn't have anybody that specialized in ministers. And the extra tax implications, yet also benefits, are so unique that I found a financial planner that mainly works with a lot of ministers and nonprofits. So that was important to me, so that they will tell us when you get ready and start drawing out money, do we do the 403 first? Do we do the Roth IRA? What do we do?
And here's the key. Whatever you're investing in, maybe you need to get more aggressive now, because maybe you're pushing 50 and you say, okay, I need to get a little more aggressive. Whatever you are taking out now is pre-tax contribution, and so that is reducing your current taxable income.
So you remember when I said with the Roth, if you made $100,000 and you took and put $7,000,
Right.
you're still going to pay taxes this year in 2025 on $100,000. Different. 403B, if you make $100,000 and you take $7,000 or $8,000, you put it to your 403B, then you're only paying taxes right now on $93,000 if you put 7. So that's the difference. But when you take that money out of the 403B, then you're going to pay tax on all your gains unless you take it out in the form of a housing allowance, which there's your tax benefit.
So which one is best?
I would tell you that it just depends on the size of your church. If you're going to get free money, start with your 403B if there's a match. If there's not, the Roth, we've done both, but we only did that 403B once it got developed by the church, which has only been the last 7 or 8 years. So we've tried to max both out at this age, but start somewhere, do something. I want to give you a little example. So I'm going to talk about compound interest. That's like, I know your eyeballs might be rolling backwards, but let's just say you invested, someone gave you a lump sum, you had an inheritance and someone gave you $10,000 and this year you invested $10,000. Let's say it made 10%. So at the end of the year, if you did that January 1st, at the end of the year, let's say it made 10% in the stocks. So at the end of the year, you would have what, $11,000, right? Because you made 10%. So then in 2026, you start with $11,000. So if you do that...
So begin to compound.
Right. If you do that, then the next year you would have $12,100. Now, it's not going to make 10% every year. It might do 8 one year, and last year ours made 20-something%. It was ridiculous,
24%.
right? It was a lot. But there's times where it goes negative. It's about not looking at it and leaving it. But I just want you to know that if you started with, if you got some money and you started with that, it's just going to take, in 40 years, you would have, I think it's like $435,000 or something.
Off that 10.
Off that 10. So you got to start somewhere, because once it gets bigger, it's like, well, $100 or $1,000 is not that much. But eventually you just leave it, sit it, don't move it. It will make a lot. It will make a difference in the end.
And here's what we're going for, is the long haul, big picture term. This isn't a fast pace. But I want to go ahead and jump another area that we have not necessarily done, but I know a lot of pastors do, and it's a good investment, is that one of the avenues that they will take are investment properties and real estate. That typically real estate is going to continue, excuse me, is going to continue to rise. And they'll either buy a property, a duplex, something like that, and then they will have tenants and they get that income. Eventually that home or a location is paid for. And so all they have is the maintenance and upkeep and insurance and those things. And
so rental income is a good thing.
It is.
But I will tell you, we decided that it was distracting for us, and we would only do it in the city we were living in. So if you're one that you're not necessarily going to be in that same city, you have to consider that you'll have a management company, or maybe you don't even want the hassle and you would have a management company. So those are additional things you would have to consider. The roof at some point you're going to need to replace. Those were just things that for us, we thought it was distracting. Owning one home was plenty. But for some people, this really works, and that's part of your...
And that's what one of the things that I know has helped is having a management company that helps oversee the properties to where you're not having to get in the guts in the trench. But there is a cost and expense to that. But in a long-term, big picture of looking at establishing yourself, that is one of the options. The other thing I'm going to share is I know in the last 45 years, I have seen things come and go of different multi-level marketing things, opportunities, whatever you want to say. And I've seen pastors jump out of their area of sweet spot and expertise and say, oh, I could make some money over there. And here's what I just want to stress on that. I know there are pastors that are working full-time jobs and to support yourself because your church isn't paying that. So I'm not referencing that at all. I'm talking about someone that is able, your church is paying you a full-time salary, it's supplying and meeting your needs, and you hear of an opportunity, usually it's a sales thing, usually it's a multi-level marketing kind of thing. Here's all I'm going to tell you. I've been offered that multiple times over the years. I've even had people say, Dean, let me just put you in. But here's where I opted and chose to say no, is when somebody sees my number come up on their phone, I don't want them wondering, is he trying to hit me up to find me and my 6 friends to come to a meeting for some proposition of some investment or something? I want it to be clear that I am your pastor. That is my sole purpose for contact. And so I chose not to get involved with those. Not saying you can't. I'm just saying be careful.
Agreed.
All right, but we have lived by Dave Ramsey principles before we knew of Dave Ramsey. Kim's parents are phenomenal financial wizards and just good common sense practices. If you've not taken FPU by Dave Ramsey, I would encourage everyone not only to take it, but to live it. And I would say the success of our financial safety, security, and progress has been by living by those principles. But just share some highlights of some things we have done.
Talks about having an emergency fund. I want to remind you that money is pretty black and white. Whatever's in your account, it's either there or it's not, right? It's either black or red, maybe, right? So that's important, but especially for a woman, security in having something. So they talk about an emergency fund, having 3 to 6 months worth of your financial, in case something happened, in case there was a fire at your church and the church.
Wait, are you talking church or personal?
Personal, but if the church couldn't pay you. What I'm saying is if your income ceased, right? If something happened or you got let go from your job or something happened and you didn't have an income, 3 to 6 months of living expenses is important. And you're like, I'm not even there yet. I got to pay off some bills. Start someplace. There's the snowball effect about paying the smallest bill, then using that money each month to pay the next one. I won't go through them all, but I'm just going to tell you
principles.
There are some great principles, and I wouldn't go through it alone. You need to get on the same page. Have a finance meeting with you and your spouse. Get a target, because if there's no target, or you're not even striving to get something paid off, or for later in the future, get on the same page with your spouse. That'll really be important to do together. It's been very difficult because Dean's like, I trust you. You just do that. But there's times where that if we don't talk about it and don't have a common goal, then when there's a purchase to be made, then one person's like, oh, no, that's not towards our goal. And the other one's like, oh, yeah, we've got plenty. So I think having a financial meeting regularly in whatever that means for your family is important.
Basically living within your means. And I know this is something that we preach, but we also have to live. And when your income increases, resist that opportunity to overspend or expand your budget, other than expanding. We're going to put more into savings. We're going to put more into a mutual fund.
And giving. I'm going to tell you that.
Yes.
It's been a long time since we gave just 10%, right? So it is important to us to invest and to continue to be generous, because there's just, a lot of the things that have happened with us are not just by chance and are not because we were stingy, but we were good planners, but we were also givers. And that's been important. So,
okay, what are some other ways of we've adventured into the stocks and different areas? Talk about some of that and just wisdom in those arenas.
I think what I said before, finding one place to put your money, and then don't get on an app every day and check it. Just leave it alone. I only checked it maybe twice a year for a long time. When you get closer to an age where you might be going to be pulling it, then you kind of reassess things. Like right now, the market is down, right? With Trump and all of that, with all that's happening and the uncertainty, the market's down. But I know that our stocks probably, and it's a big amount, and keep going down, but we're not trying to pull money from that. So I'm not watching it and getting nervous. So I'm just going to tell you,
we've come through a lot of
ups and downs,
lulls, but we continue to see we're probably averaging that 12% average per year over the long haul,
Right.
which they say you should see in a mutual fund.
But you can't get too discouraged the years where
Right.
for a whole year it went down 8%, it went down 12%. Because then when it goes up 24% one year, it is just the ups and downs or it's just going to happen. So you need to be prepared for that and not let that make you nervous, knowing this is for the long haul. This is not for tomorrow.
When we saw the market drop in stocks, I'm thinking back to COVID, there were multiple industries that were tanking because of COVID and so forth. And we actually got excited and we said, wow, these shares were at $54 in 2019. They have dropped. And so when the market drops, that's when we look and say and pray, God, where would you have us invest? Some that we invested in didn't do so hot. Some of them really have rebounded very healthy.
Let me talk quickly about that then. We have very few just stocks where we bought Walmart or where we bought whatever. So what is a mutual fund? Which is when you go to these companies, what they do is their experts take lots of different individual stocks, snowball it into one mutual fund, which is less volatile. Right?
Yes.
So if you've got Tesla stock and it's down 40% right now, that's unfortunate. But here's the thing, it'll probably go back up, but that's just one stock. So if you've got a mutual fund that has 100 or 200 or whatever different little things or 50, it's someone else that's way smarter than me that does the market, that kind of puts it together. That's the difference. So that's a mutual fund, which is quite a few stocks versus a single stock. We have a few single stock things where we've invested in, but not many, because those are really up and down and just based on one company.
A little more volatile.
Yes.
So the big question is, when should I start thinking about retirement? If you just graduated from Bible college or seminary and you're beginning your career in ministry, start thinking about retirement. As far as the aspect of the financial investment portion. And then you have to ask yourself, what is your vision for the future? That, well, maybe I do want to continue to help in the church in part-time, or maybe you're going to write books and travel or speak, or you're going to do coaching or mentoring, whatever that looks like, and maybe you're going to have some income. One of the things that we've been aiming as I got into my 60s is being intentional on wanting to pay our house off so that by the time we did hit that zone that we don't have an income from the local church, that we basically have all of our big debt
That's
relieved.
a really good point. So the last house that we purchased, I said, we can't keep doing a 30-year mortgage, right?
Yeah.
And so we said, okay, with this one, we have to buy a house within our means with a 15-year mortgage so that it's paid off pretty close to when you're mid-60s. So
Yep.
I would just encourage that, so that you think, oh, a 30-year mortgage. Well, just remember, if you're 45 right now, a 30-year mortgage, by the time it would be paid off, unless you start doing double payments or are super intentional, that's 75? Do you want to work and have that house payment? Because traditionally your house payment is going to be your biggest expense every single month.
So just some takeaways. Start investing small now, wherever you can. It's going to pay off in the long run. Consider talking to your board about establishing a 403B for you, for your employees. We offer it to all of our employees who have been here past 90 days. And we just see that we are modeling as a church the elements that we believe in, and it is a very healthy perk to the employees that work here.
And don't be discouraged, please.
Yeah.
Be encouraged. Be encouraged. You're like, oh, I haven't done whatever. You know what? That's okay. Start today. And again, you don't have to remember or understand everything that we've said. If it makes you ask better questions, if you meet with someone one time and get some vision, that's what today is. Get a little vision for your future.
Yep. Hey, thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next month. If you know somebody that could benefit from this podcast on finances and retirement in the future, please share it with a friend. Maybe sit down with your spouse as well and listen to it together and get a corporate plan as you move forward. So God bless you guys. Have a great month. We'll see you in April.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. For a free sermon series and teaching outlines by Pastor Dean, visit us at deanhawk.com. Be sure and join us next month as we continue our growth on leadership.